Okay, so now we're actually going to look at hems and hand stitches, and we're going to look at our stitching and see how we did. We're going to start with the back stitches. So now I walked you through all of these back stitch stitching here, and so I kind of already talked about the assessment on that. So what I'm looking for here for the stitching, and was the front, and remember I had lines here, those pressed out with the heat. So I'm going to turn this over, and this is the underside, and I'm going to look how clean this is as well. So first I've left stick pins or straight pins in here, and that's just to keep the two fabrics from pulling apart because I don't want these stitches to be pulled apart. So let's first look at the back stitch. So I'm looking for how straight the stitches are, and then I'm going to look for how even those are. And remember, as a helper, I actually put marks for each of those 1/4 inches. Now there's a little area here where it's a little bit more diagonal than it is straight, as we see up here. So I would probably just kind of circle that and say, what happened there? And then let's have a look on the inside. And actually, I had stopped halfway through. As you can see, I have spaces here and here. And I think it was because I was trying to come back there. So if ever your thread breaks and you try to start over and kind of come back into your original stitching, really make sure that you're getting right there on that stitch line, because I can see right here where the break was, and if I turn it over, that's exactly where I circled where I thought there was a little bit of a problem. And you can see right here I have a little bit more diagonal stitch than I have a straight stitch. Not too bad, but the stitch line is actually very nice. Now if we look at the half back stitch, what I'm looking for is stitch, space, and here I'm looking for the length of the stitch and the space of the stitch match, and everything looks pretty even. I did some pretty good marks for myself. And even if you're working on, professional clothing, doing this half back stitch as a design detail, you would probably go ahead and put the marks on the clothing where you wanted your stitches to be. I would do that because your markings can be pressed out or washed out. So what I'm looking for is also the consistency of the straight line, and right here we have a little bit of an issue, and slightly here. So again, this was the area where I kind of had started over and continued, so I need to be a little bit more thoughtful or careful when I start over again. So now let's have a look here at the pick stitch, and I see some issues. Is that now my pick stitches could have been a little bit thicker, and I'm just making markings here so you can see, because the reason I did that is because I really originally thought I just wanted tiny pick stitches, which are really hard to keep even, as you can see here. I kind of, one I don't even see, and they're very tiny, but I actually should have used this pick stitch more as a decorative piece. So my pick stitches probably should have been maybe equal to more like this size, which is about a 1/16, and that carried that consistently all the way through, because pick stitches are usually used as a detail or decoration. So this one, not so good. I'm going to probably go back and redo this sample. I'm not going to show you that, but I will probably do that because that's the kind of person I am. However, if I got to this point as a student, I would not turn this in. I would probably rip these out, or I would just, with the okay of my instructor, cut this fabric off and then just cut another piece, 2 pieces of fabric, and do the pick stitches over on a separate piece if the 2 of my other back stitches look good. So this is what I would be looking at as a problem area because I've lost that consistency. So, okay, let's move on to the hemming stitch, the catch stitch. And I've done the rest of the stitches as hems. So remember, we folded over the fabric, and then we've done these individual stitches as hems. So, but of course, you can use this to attach 2 layers of fabric, like an interlining or a interfacing, if you're using sew and interfacing. So on this one, what I'm looking for is I will probably just kind of lift this up a little bit, and I don't know if you can see that in the camera. Yeah, you can see that okay here. I would want to lift this up here, and I want to look at the consistency of the widths of these stitches. The consistency will be the distance between the hem allowance that I grab and the fabric that I grab back to the hem allowance. So this actually looks really consistent. Now, I don't really want to see on this one. You could also use this as decorative, although I didn't plan to do that. So on the outside, I really don't want to see anything, because on this catch stitch, we're just catching that one little yarn in the fabric. Okay, and I've used red thread so you can see what I'm doing, and also to see if we can see anything on the outside. And I can't really see anything, and I did not pull the thread really tight to make an indentation, because we don't really want that on a hem. So, and again, this catch stitch is used so that the hem has a little bit of movement so it doesn't pull the outer fabric. But this looks really consistent. This is a very good sample. So let's move on to the invisible catch stitch. And why do I say that this is the invisible catch stitch? Well, it's because I don't see any stitching up here on the top. Let's have a look at the outside real quick. Again, I don't see any of the stitches. I didn't pull my stitching really tight. If you look really close, just because this is see-through, you can see my thread here. But on a real garment, you wouldn't see that, especially if it were lined. You would never see that on the outside. So the way we did this, remember we folded this back to the inside, and we put our stitches inside of the garment lower than the edge of our hem. Okay, so but we still did that same kind of crisscrossing catch stitch that we did, which allows the hem to move. And I'm looking for the consistency of the stitches and also the height of the stitches. And this one looks a little bit higher than the others, so I might just circle that a little bit. We may want to practice on that consistency a little bit better. But all in all, I can't see any of the stitches. This is a really great sample. Our next hand stitch is the actual invisible stitch, and I like doing this stitch when I really need a stable hem and I want that hem to really attach to the garment. So maybe for a more of a pile fabric where you don't want that hem to be lost, and you don't want any movement in the hem, but you don't want to see any stitching. So again, this is very close to the fabric. I've pulled those stitches nice and snug. That hem is not moving anywhere, and I've only grabbed one little yarn in that. If you look here, you have to look close. You can see my little red dots there, that they are all very consistent widths. And then look on the outside. Because I only took that one little yarn, you can't see the stitching, although if you look close, because this is a lightweight fabric, and because I pulled the stitches snug, you can see little indentations of where those stitches are. But if you had a heavier mid-weight or pile fabric, or even like a tweed, you would never see any of those stitches. So this is used for when you don't want that hem to go anywhere. You want it to be very stable, and I don't want to say stiff, but you definitely want more of a stable hem area. This is a very good sample. Okay, and our last hand stitch is called the slip stitch, and this is used mainly for speed. If you want to quickly hem something, you're just basically stitching in that straight line. But again, you're going back to catch the hem, catch the fabric, catch the hem, catch the fabric. But can also be used to be decorative. And I'll flip this over really quickly. And remember, I can see the stitching. So sometimes if you want to do a decorative stitch in a contrasting thread, sometimes that's very nice to see, as long as your stitching is very consistent, and I'm pretty consistent from the beginning here to those widths. But this is not meant to hold really snugly. This is also just kind of maybe for a lighter weight fabric, where you don't want heavy stitching in. That would be great. And also it can be used to baste two pieces of fabric together before you actually stitch them, if you just want to butt them up together. But this can again be used for a lightweight fabric for a hem, and this is a great quality sample. And so there are our hand stitching.